All right, so as we move to the next session, that is Anton section 3, where we'll be looking at the comparative exploration of scoping and systematic literature review for high impact journals. And we have our facilitator in the house in the person of not less than Professor Olubanke Ogunlana, a professor of biochemistry and also the M&E officer for Capicase, Covenant University, Otta. You are welcome, ma. You can have the floor, ma.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the facilitator of this program, the organizers, Professor Adetiba. Thank you for inviting me to present on this very germane topic, comparative exploration of scoping and systematic literature reviews for high impact journal. My name is Professor Olubanke Ogunlana. So I'll be presenting under this outline. So when we talk about review, thank God I've had so many people that have presented ahead of me, and I've told you the importance of having to publish. Okay? And the purpose why we are looking at publication is not just to just graduate from Covenant University and earn your certificate, but it's beyond that. To have a green face, as said by our honorable facilitator, and then to be able to see yourself emerge into an independent researcher. When we talk about publication, we can have a research publication and we can have a review article. So today we'll be looking at review article, and it's not all the review article we'll be looking at. We'll be looking at scoping review and systematic review. So review articles are generally scholarly syntheses of existing research on particular topic. So it provides a comprehensive view of work that had been done before. So ordinarily, as a researcher, any field that you find yourself, you want to have a review of that topic. So whatever topic that you have been given, you want to have a review. I'm sometimes baffled when students had passed through Covenant University for 2 years and they're having problem graduating because they just cannot have 2 publications. Before you even eat into the lab, you're supposed to have done a review of your topic. And if you have done that, I'm sure you won't be part of the people that, your certificate will be held back because you are not able to publish. So review helps to identify the gaps in literature and give you an insight. So it gives you an insight of the particular topic that you have been given. So because sometimes you just have a broad topic, for you to narrow down and be able to know what exactly you need to do a review of your research topic. So, importance of review, it helps to summarize existing knowledge. So, you get to know what had been done and you're able to summarize it. It helps to compile and synthesize all available information. You're able to synthesize it. You're able to identify the gaps. And then you're able to highlight where there is sufficient data, where there is data overload, and where there is insufficient data. You're able to identify it because you have been able to do a good review. And then you are able to be guided in your future research. What are you going to do? It's going to give you the more review you do, it will enable you to move deeper into where you can make the best relevance of that topic. And then gives you direction on new study and inform practice and policy. So it's not all review that inform practice and policy. So there are different reviews. So we'll be talking about some of them. Then it provides evidence-based insight for decision making. And it enhances the research visibility. We've talked about when you publish, you become green. and then people see you as an emerging or independent researcher. And then it gives you an edge into high impact journal publication. When you do a good review, no high impact journal will be able to say no to you because you have done a very good one. So it gives you an edge to have your paper being published there. And when you have your paper being published there, you have high impact of being cited because it has wide readership. Okay? So we'll be talking about different reviews. We have so many different reviews. We have more than 25 different types. More than 25 different types. But we'll just look at very few maybe top 9 or thereabout. So the one that is very key to my topic is systematic review. Systematic review is a rigorous methodological approach to synthesizing new evidence based on specific research question. So the question is defined. So, and it has these various characteristics. It has a predefined eligibility criteria. So it's not too flexible. It's not something that, maybe as you go along, you then decide to retrace your step and change. No, it's predefined. It's explicit. It has a search strategy, and is based on assessment of study quality, and then it has to do with synthesized findings. So it has strength. It's highly reliable and is very valid. It's highly reproducible because the method is approved, and it provides strong evidence for decision making. So most times we use it a lot in health-related issues and other issues. However, it's time-consuming and resource-intensive, and it requires high-quality studies. So there is a probability of leaving out some studies that may be relevant because from your own assessment, you have categorized them as not part of your inclusion criteria. So there is that probability of leaving some studies out. They call them gray papers, of leaving them out, whereas they were important, but by your classification, they are not important. So you can leave them out. Then we have scoping review. It's also equally called mapping review. So for scoping review, it has to do with broad exploration of evidence to identify key concepts, gaps, and research trends. So the issue with scoping review is that it's like you don't know what you're looking for, but you're just looking. So it's not like a systematic review that is more streamlined, that is more focused. So that's why I put that young guy. You know, when you hold when you look into the future, sometimes you don't even know what you will find. You are just looking, and then you're able to find and identify innovative and different things based on your ability to look and search. Okay, so it's exploratory. So it's you just keep looking, and then it often bring out emerging topics that may not be there originally, that may not even be part. So that means that it also allows you to, it's flexible. You can change your questions as you move. You can decide to say, this is research questions that you are starting with, but as you explore, as you move, you may decide to say, it seems this is the emerging topic, and you may begin to change, unlike the first one. And sometimes quality may not be the key thing, like in systematic review. So the quality of the studies may not be the key thing, but you just want to see broad, comprehensive review of different findings. And then it has its own strength too. You are able to have diverse opinion, diverse view. And then you are able to identify gaps, and from the gaps, you are guided into the emerging field, into the future of possible research that you may want to do. Okay? So because the quality of the evidence does not really matter, that is a major limitation. Okay? So because sometimes people will say, are you sure that what you're finding is so reliable? So usually what happens with the scoping review is that it guides you to systematic review. So I expect students, when you come, you are just given a broad view of this is the direction to go. So if there is anything to do, you want to do a scoping review. And then ordinarily, if you do a good scoping review, you'll be able to identify required gaps and then move you into an emerging field. And from the scoping review, you will have identified other areas that you can now narrow down into systematic review. We also have narrative review, or sometimes it's called the traditional review. So traditional review is common, is descriptive in nature. So it doesn't have a strict methodology. So you can just go into the literature, go into Google Scholar, PubMed, Scopus, Science Direct, Medline, and just get the opinion, people to publish work on your line of research. Pull them together, arrange it in your own order, and write a traditional review. And put citations is called a narrative review. Okay, what's the strength there? It's flexible. It's adaptable. You are the one defining your criteria per time. So you can always change, you can rechange, you can reorder, you can reline, you can realign. So it's very flexible and adaptable. So it's also very useful in providing an overview. In case you are completely lost and you want to start from somewhere, it's a good place to also start. So, however, it's prone to bias because the methodology is not defined. So a lot of people believe, so it's scientifically believed that your findings are not also very accurate or might not be accurate. So it lacks reproducibility because there is no predefined methodology. So we also have meta-analysis. So meta-analysis is like the systematic review, but it's more of a quantitative systematic review. So it's based on strong statistical analysis. So it's a statistical synthesis of data from multiple scientific studies to derive a pool of estimates. So your analysis can give you an effect. Okay, is it a positive effect by the time you justify with statistics, or a negative effect? And what's the strength and limitation of that? It gives a high precision in estimating power. You're able to have high precision. You're able to now authoritatively say, oh, that this factor, this intervention will give you a positive effect or a negative effect. It's not just that this intervention is valid, or from this intervention, these are my sentences. No, it's not just that, but you are so sure because you have subjected it to statistics that the effect is either a positive effect or a negative effect. So that is the strength of meta-analysis. And the limitation is that it requires a homogeneous data. It requires homogeneous data, and it can be affected by publication bias. So we also have rapid review. So sometimes you just want to synthesize evidence of review within a limited time frame, maybe on something very narrow. And then the strength there is that it's very fast, it's timely, and it's practical. So it can be used for urgent decision making. In case you are just interested in finding something about a narrow field and you want to do a short review, a rapid review on it, is allowed. So the problem there is that sometimes there is compromise because the comprehensiveness is compromised. It's not very broad. It's not broad and deep at the same time. So you see, when you talk about scoping review, it's very broad. It's diverse. It gives you diverse perspective. And when you talk about systematic review, it gives you direct, in line with your research question, deep down view on your question. But for this, you just look at something within a short time. It doesn't need to be very broad, and it doesn't need to be very deep. So it gives that you just have an overview of that topic so that you can be guided. Maybe you want to take a decision, but these are not very common types of review. And then we have an umbrella review. Umbrella review talks about a pool of different systematic review. So that's why it's called the umbrella. So a synthesis of multiple systematic review on related topics. So if you now pull different systematic review together and you now do another level of systematic review on it, it's called umbrella review. So it gives very broad view because we are looking at different evidences, piece of evidence, and then we are looking at a pool of it. So it gives you that broad perspective, and policymakers always want to know what is the umbrella review on their policy. And the limitation is that it's limited by the depth of individual studies. So if the different systematic review is not very deep, then it may be difficult to bring all of them together and relate with them as a single study. So that can be a major limitation. And we have the realistic review. Under the realistic review, it focuses on understanding how and why intervention work within a particular context. So, like you may want to see the effect of anti-malaria now on a particular population. So you may want to do so the population is constrained, is narrow. So it won't be like systematic review. So in this case now, it's context sensitive. So you are looking at a particular context, maybe a particular population. So it's context specific. But however, the strength is that you are looking at the theory. If the theory applies in this context, there is high level that it will apply overall. So, but the limitation there is that it's subjective. It's subjective. And then we have critical review. We also have integrative review. So I told you that I will just be taking a look at very few. I think I stopped at 12. We also have quantitative evidence synthesis, mixed method. Mixed method means that you probably look at quantitative and qualitative evidence. And then we can look at theme. You can just take a look at maybe a thematic area and then review it. So it's called the thematic synthesis. So, like I told you, the number of review types that we have is more than 25. So what I've seen in the last few years is that just like methodology, so different people keep coming up with different type of review. As long as they can, as long as they can define it, they can bring out the strength, the limitation, people is documented and is acceptable. So each review had been turned to like an experimental design where you can have different methodology. So now looking more in depth at the review that we're talking about. So exploration into the systematic review. So systematic review, like we said before, is a research synthesis, whereas the scoping review is more of a knowledge synthesis. So it seeks to identify, evaluate, and summarize all available evidence on a specific research question. So what does it do? It uses a predefined, rigorous, transparent method to minimize bias and ensure reproducibility of the results. So it provides reliable evidence for decision making, policy formulation, practice, and is often used in healthcare, education, and social sciences. So it's very key. We'll be looking at some examples later on. So why do we do systematic review? It's a gold standard for evidence synthesis. So it's like we pull so many different results of different researchers together, and we want to synthesize them and be able to reach a conclusion that, a number of them are actually pinpointing at the same thing. And then, so that's why you can see complex mixture of different reviews all going in a golden direction. So it provides robust evidence for decision making, because at that point now, the policymakers are sure that it's not just one person sitting down in his lab and coming up with a result, but now a lot of results are agreeing and pointing in the same direction. So it puts more reliability on that result. So policymakers are willing to use it for their implementation studies. And then is used in policy making and guideline development, and then for standardized methodology. So we can look at, all of these directions, do they use the same methodology? Okay, so WHO now, UNICEF and all the regulatory bodies can then use it to improve their methodology. So it has a framework. So what's the framework for systematic review? So we have the input, the process, and the output. So when we look at the input, something is very key, and that is research question. You have to have a research questions that is defined by PICO. We'll still talk about it later, what PICO is. And that research question has to guide you into your methodology, and the methodology has to be registered. It has to be registered for systematic review. And then the process, once you have registered your methodology and it's been approved, then you move on to the process, you do your literature review, you screen, data extraction, quality assessment, and then you get your output, and then you write your results. And then you make your recommendation based on the evidence, the strength, and the limitation. So that's different between systematic review and scoping review. Scoping review is going to give you a broad perspective, but this is going to be strictly based on what you're able to find with respect to the evidence from your study and the limitation. So when we look at the framework, we said the first one is crafting your research question. So your research questions has to be framed in line with PICO. And what's the full meaning of PICO? Population, intervention, comparison, outcome. So that's why it's research sentences. So because you are having an intervention and you are having a comparison. So it's a framework, that is actually the starting point for systematic review. So when you have this, it helps you to be focused and maintain on the relevance of your study. And remember, the research questions is predetermined and the methodology is also registered. So the flexibility for this study is not there, like we have in the scoping review. So I said, example, what is the effect of drug X on reducing the symptoms of Y when compared to placebo? You know, I'm a biologist. Okay, so I'm sure you can relate it for engineers. You can but what is important is that you want to have an intervention. You are comparing to a parameter, and then you are hoping to have an output. And then so when you look at it, a research question, the effect of drug X. So for me, if I want to see maybe I want to tell WHO or World Health that, for diabetics, for instance, that a newer drug is better than an existing one. So I can walk around my research questions and bring evidence to justify that the drug X has better glycemic index to the placebo. The placebo in this case might be nothing, or it might be another standard of care that is recognized. So if I'm able to bring that evidence and say that, drug X that is new is able to achieve better impact than the already approved drug, then I'm calling, whose attention am I calling? Is it patient? Whose attention am I calling? Policymakers. I'm calling the attention of policymakers. So I'm not speaking to patients. I'm not even speaking to doctors. I'm calling the attention of the policymakers, because doctors are guided by standard. They are guided by standard. And if as a biochemist, if as a toxicologist also, I probably want to look at maybe benzene is being used in rubber industry, and I know that benzene is cytotoxic in its approach, and I come up with another solvent. So I will look at if the improvement, the better outcome, or so with respect to toxicity and with respect to functionality of the new solvent over benzene. So the attention of the people I'm calling is the regulators, because regulators will be the one to say, going forward, when the evidence is convincing, you see, convincing. So it may not stop with one systematic review. So when we have series of systematic review all pointing in the same direction, and then we have an umbrella review, then the evidence is reliable and convincing. So the attention of the people I'm calling is the regulators. The regulators will now say, oh, we are reviewing standards, because they review standards maybe every 2 years, every 3 years. So when they review standards and they pull reviews together, they will now say, oh, based on this convincing evidence, we are saying that going forward, this drug X should be used in place of this, or especially when you are not having improved output or outcome from the patient, then we can consider this, okay? So that is one of the real advantage of systematic review. So the second one is the protocol has to be developed and it has to be registered. The protocol has to be developed and it has to be registered. So it's a predefined or predetermined document that ensures transparency and minimizes bias. So what does it do? It has objective. So the objective is clearly defined. So the scope, the purpose, the eligibility criteria, the inclusion, the exclusion criteria is also defined. So the population, we talk about PICO. The population is defined. The intervention is defined. And then the study design is also defined. And then the search strategy is also defined. So the number of databases, because somebody must be able to pick that your methodology and replicate your study. So that's the difference between the normal, traditional, or narrative review. I can design to do based on evidences, piece of evidence I'm able to see on literature. I can pull my traditional review together and say I've published a review. But for this, the methodology is defined. So that defined methodology can be picked by somewhere else, by someone, and then used within the same population, within the same intervention, and still be able to get the same result. And then the data management has to be we also have to say, oh, for the data management, the data extraction will be done this way. And then the quality assessment plan has to be, this type of tool has to be used for the quality assessment plan. And then whatever we are using, if we are using specific statistical method or thematic analysis technique, this has to be defined. And then once this is established, it will be submitted on the registration platform. So we have different registration platforms. I think I'm aware of 3. So we have the one that is called the Prospero. The full meaning is International Prospective Registrar of Systematic Review. So this particular review is more inclined towards health. So most times is the health-based interventions that they accept. In fact, they don't accept the scoping review at all. So for them, scoping review is a no-no. And then we have the JBI. JBI is more restrictive because it's only open to the registered members, and it's called the Jonah Briggs Institute. So this is open to all levels of systematic review, and scoping review too can be accepted. It's just that it's not a must. So this you send the registration in and it's approved, and then you can move on. So the reason why registration is key is not to waste our effort. You want to do work that is novel. You don't want to repeat work that had been done. So, because this previous review had been registered. So when you submit, they will look at it. If there are merit in it for you to go on, they will tell you, this has merit, please go on. Then you'll be able to continue. But if the so many systematic review had been done using the same research question, they will tell you, no, why not look at another population? Why not look at another intervention? Why not just change it to be able to have a different perspective? And then, after that, then we'll move to a comprehensive literature search. So under the comprehensive literature search, you can use multiple databases. You can use PubMed, you can use Scopus, Web of Science, so you can get enough documents relating to your search words. Remember, from the methodology, your search words are already defined, different synonyms and different, so you can use and or in the search words so that it can pick your search words the way you want. So, and that's already defined. So, and it also allows for gray literature sources. So gray means that unpublished literature. So literature that are not publications that are not peer reviewed is also accepted. And then after that, you can use different strings of search words and then different strings of terminologies and or within the title, within the abstract, so that you get the best crops of different literature that you want. Because it's good to get a lot, because by the time you start subjecting your exclusion and inclusion criteria, you start deleting, removing, until sometimes I've seen people with 400 and then eventually narrow down to less than 20. And it's less than 20 that they will now read to synthesize their evidence and then come up with their findings. Then after that, the fourth one is screening and selection of studies. So the screening is done in two stages. You screen with title and abstract. So because if you have like 500 publications, you can't read all. That's going to take forever. So the best way to first do the first level of screening is to use the title and abstract. So you use this title and abstract. So by the time you know what you are looking for, like the title I gave you now, if I'm looking at drug X, drug Y intervention, or glycemic control intervention based on drug X or drug Y, and for better outcome, which is the glycemic index reduction. So with that now, there's no way out from the title, from the abstract, I will not know if those papers speaks to my research questions. So, and if I see that they don't, I just throw it aside. Ordinarily before, maybe when I was searching, I've used the drug X, drug Y, and or glycemic index, diabetics, type 2 diabetics, different things. So it's going to give me all manner of poll. And that's why I can have like 500. But I now have to now look at it one by one with respect to title and abstract at the first level to be sure that I prune it down. And thereafter, you can then look at full text. So how many do you have full text? How many do you have the full text in English? If you are an English author, or French, if you can convert and translate to English. So, but that will have been stated in your methodology. So if you are interested in also French publications, because you know Nina is around you, or you have other persons that can readily translate in French to English, then you will have stated it in your methodology that, French manuscripts are not excluded because there is they to be translated to English. And then you now look at the full text and you view it, and then you'll be able to use it again to now do a more just screening based on your research question. And thereafter, you will now extract. So I've seen people now do normal extraction. They just use their hand. But now there are AI tools that people can use to do extraction. Okay, AI tools, a lot of AI tools can be used to do extraction. So some of the ones I've also done, I've also used myself and people around me. One can use students, but has to be dedicated students. No students, some students just populate and just replicate the same thing. So you have to, if you are using your friends or a co-author, you have to meet, and then you have to sometimes, whatever, by the time the final prune is done and it's now like 20, 30, whatever the other person had done is good that another person will vet. So if you are two that have done that assignment, you can change whatever those ones have recommended. You can look at it, and whatever you have recommended, the other person can also take a look. So it's always good to do the extraction well. So for me, because I've not used AI for it before, but I know that you can now use AI. Okay, you can upload your papers on AI and tell your papers to summarize with respect to all of these parameters, and AI will summarize for you without you even reading the full paper. Okay, but if you have to read the full paper, you can go on Excel, classify, title, authors, summary, and then do the reading, the title, the authors, the summary, paste it. That means you have to, on your own, summarize it. But now life is easy. AI can also do that summarization. And then by the time you do that, you'll be able to now review the full paper and then be able to say, oh, this aligns. And then, but always remember your methodology has to be well used. It's been approved for systematic review. So use your methodology, what you have defined as your inclusion, exclusion criteria, to prune until you are able to get those ones that actually speaks to your research question. And then thereafter, you want to assess the study quality. So you assess that using different tools. And then the tools will help you to reduce bias in the study and help you to ensure that your study pool is reliable and is valid. So each of the papers now that you have picked, you want to be sure that, oh, based, you want to ascertain their quality. And then after that, you then move to the next stage. And then based on if it's the qualitative narrative you are doing or quantitative narrative, you then so if it's a qualitative narrative you are doing, so that means you have to use themes and trends now to further synthesize your data and group. So you have to be able to talk about what the themes are saying, what's the trend in this paper with respect to your research questions. So is it giving you a good trend? How the papers fall in the same direction or some are saying no? So are they all agreeing with themselves or not? So that is what you do. But for meta-analysis, you have to subject it further to statistical evaluation. And then thereafter, you do your reporting. And you do your reporting in line with PRISMA. So the full meaning of PRISMA is Preferred Reporting Items for Systematic Review and Meta-Analysis. So it's a standard guideline for reporting systematic review. I have some screenshots of how PRISMA framework looks like. So this is how it looks like. It has title and abstract, introduction, methods, result, discussion, and conclusion. And if you look at it, this is the PRISMA diagram flow diagram. So if you take a look, you'll be able to speak to this. This will be part of your systematic review. It gives you how many databases did you employ in your study. So you can see N, you just put it. How many register sites? So maybe beyond the databases now, maybe some other register sites, you put it. So record you identified from databases, you put it. Record removed before screening. So maybe, I don't know how many you got here. So maybe some of them are duplicated. So you remove it. Record marked as ineligible by automation tools. Maybe you subjected it to an automation tool. And so by the time you prune, you get that. So record screen. So by the time you now screen, so at the end of the day, what you have that will be included will be studied, included in the review, studied, report of included studies, studies included in review, then report of included studies. So that's what you have as a final. And then this is the checklist for presentation, for reporting of systematic review. So I hope you have a title, so you check. There's a title. It's important that you have an abstract, you check. So your introduction, is there a rationale? Do you have objective? You check. And then your methodology. Remember that methodology is already predefined, but it should have all of these variables. Your methodology should have all of these variables. So the reason why Primas is there is to act as a guide. So that, when you look at it, and it can even guide your write-up. So when you look at it, this is not there, you can quickly ensure that you add it to make sure that you have a robust paper. And you remember, is the intent of this work is to be able to publish in our index. Okay? And then this is the other one. So for results, your discussion. So other information that you have to put, is already registered. So you have to give information on the registration and protocol, and you have to give other supporting information. You are allowed to give if there is any conflict of interest, if there is any financial support, acknowledgement, all of this is also allowed. So after you have done this, the systematic review, in summary, will give you a well-structured synthesis. So we can have a well-structured synthesis of qualitative or quantitative data. It will help to identify the patterns, the trends, and the gaps. So you are going to, by the time you are done, you are going to be able to identify the patterns. By the time you are done, you may not just have more than 16 articles, or 20 articles. What is the trend of your evidence in those articles? What is the trend? What is their pattern like? What is the identified gaps from those papers? So you talk about it. And then you'll be able to provide actionable recommendation. Remember, it's for intervention. The systematic review is for intervention. You are trying to say that something, if it's used in place of another thing, will give a better output. So you should be able to, at the end of the paper, give that actionable recommendation. And if you think, and your limitation should also be there, maybe I've seen some limitations, the paper will say, okay, maybe there's not much work in this area of research, so you are limited by few publications, and you know that will probably affect your overall output. So we'll also be looking at what a scoping review is. Is a knowledge synthesis. What did I call the other one the other time? So this is a knowledge synthesis that aims to map the breadth and scope of research activities on a given topic or question. So it provides an overview of existing evidence and identify gaps. It also highlights areas for future research without necessarily assessing study quality. So quality is important in systematic review, but this, without you emphasizing on quality, you can use it to have, and that's why it's exploratory view or this review. It gives you that wide view, and from there you can identify gaps in line with your research question. So it answers open-ended research questions. So it's not closed, it's not deep like what we have under systematic review, and is exploratory in nature. It clarifies key concepts, definitions, methodologies, and informs the development of future systematic review or research priorities. That's why I think every student should start from here, unless you are moving on someone riding on the back of but maybe another progressive student that have done the work in the past, and the work is continuous. But if not, if it's an area that is new to you, it's good to just start from scoping review. It's intentional. One of the expectation of scoping review is that it will guide the development of systematic review. So that's one of the expectation or other research priorities. Even if you are not going to do a systematic review, it can guide from a pool of wide assessment or review of a research area. You can begin to know what work had been done, but is different from the traditional review. So why scoping review is ideal for mapping broad research areas. So you're able to map. So like some of my students now, I work on hydrogen-related effect of hydrogen-related metabolism or genes on prostate cancer. So, well, we can do a review, a scoping review of that area, and then we can then do a systematic review that will now narrow down to more specific genes and their impact or their implication on treatment of prostate cancer that can then inform other research priorities for the student to move further. So that way, sometimes when they are even asking you questions, have you heard about the publication of so, because you have done an in-depth review, most times you'll be able to say, yes, somebody that have probably done multiple publications in that line, you definitely, there is high likelihood that you pick it up in your review. But when somebody is asking, have you heard about this person, and the students are usually lost, then you know that work is not well reviewed before entering into the lab. And sometimes if you are not careful, you may not just be repeating a work that had been done. Okay? So another thing why it is good that we do a scoping review is that it helps to identify research gaps. You can identify gaps. It helps to clarify definition and conceptual boundaries. It's also useful as a precursor to systematic review, and I said as a preliminary assessment. So that means we start from there and then move. So we can move to a systematic review, or we can have a better research priorities to then use to enter into the lab or to do more detailed work. So what's the framework? If you look at it, the framework looks similar to the systematic review, because we are doing a comparative assessment here. So it's also research questions is key. It's good to have a broad research question this time around, and is aimed at mapping the extent and nature of evidence. So you want to map, and then the protocol is also predefined, but registration is not necessary. However, because of the flexibility of this, your protocol, even your research questions, you can change it a little bit before you eventually eat into the methodology that you have to go and do your literature search. You can change. Okay, then thereafter you process, and then you have an output. So let's look at the methodology of scoping review. It's good to define your research objectives and questions. So all of them, you have to define your research objectives and questions. Okay, so if you do a research and your research is not solving any problem, it's not going to be a worthy research. Like somebody asked a question in a meeting I attended, was it earlier this week? Yes, I think it was earlier this week, that all problems, how did he ask that question? All problems have solution, but not all solutions have problems. Explain. Okay, so when there is a problem, even if you don't have the solution now, don't assume there is no solution. There is solution. So that's why you just have to keep thinking about it, because as long as it's a problem, there will definitely be a solution. However, it's not all solutions that came up from a problem. So although some people said no, for it to be called a solution, it means that it was solving a problem. Okay, but the thought behind that statement is that you may just sit down somewhere and innovate, and you are not necessarily coming up from a problem-solving approach. And it gives you an innovation, it gives you an invention, but that is not born out of a problem-solving approach. But for research is intentionally rooted in solving problems. And that is why problem is key, even as you do your review. Okay, so for this scoping review too, you have to define your research objectives, and your research question have to be defined. So you can see the example of a question under scoping review. What evidence exists on X? What are the key themes in Y? So you can see the difference between the question here and the question under systematic review. And the framework that guides the question under the scoping review is called population concept. That's the framework. So who can tell me what the framework that guides our problem in the other one is called PICO? What does PICO means? And outcome. So, but in this particular one now, we want to understand the evidence that exists within the concept. So, like for instance now, somebody can just say, what is the impact of hydrogen-related metabolism or hydrogen genes or hydrogen-related genes on prostate cancer? Is very wide. It has diverse, because there are so many opinions, so many research, so many evidence around. So it's going to give you a diverse output. Okay? So that has to be, so that's why it's going to give you a broad outcome or output. So you also have to develop the scoping review, the review protocol. So usually it has objective, eligibility criteria, search strategy, data charting, and method of synthesis. So, and sometimes, like I told you, that registration of scoping review is not a must, but JBI and Open Science Framework also sometimes allow you to just put it there to be sure that you are also not duplicating efforts. If it's something that somebody had done before, then there's no need to duplicate effort. So you can also register it, but it's not a must. Okay, so thereafter, you can then move to the literature search. And then you can do your literature search with different databases like PubMed, Scopus, Web of Science, as well as use Gray Literature Review. And then under this, you can use policy documents, reports that are not necessarily peer-reviewed documents, but published documents that can be accessible and usable. Then thereafter, you then will screen. You also screen based on your inclusion exclusion criteria, and then if there are inconsistency in in some of your reports, you can remove it. Or if we have dual the literature, you can also remove it. You can screen it to now have more defined literature, published literature, that you would then move on to data extraction. So you can also do data extraction using AI, like we said in the systematic review, or you can do the traditional one in which you put your findings on in Excel, and then you can organize your results into tables, into charts, into evidence map. So you can have map of evidence, and then thereafter you can then write, you can analyze and synthesize the results, and then move on to your write-up. So the method for reporting the scoping review is called the Prisma SCR. So it's called the Preferred Reporting Items for Systematic Review and Meta-Analysis, extension for scoping review. So it looks more like that of the systematic review. And tables, flow, diagrams, teams map. So teams are things that are coming out from those papers. So for me now, in my view, in my field, things like diabetics will be coming out, glycemic control will be coming out, fasting blood sugar will be coming out. So those are you can map those themes that are coming out from the paper. You can see the frequency at which they come out. So that is the map that you can do a theme mapping. Then the summary of the scoping review, you can use narrative, narrative sentences for mapping, you can highlight key concepts. Then for scoping review, you provide broad recommendation. You remember from the beginning, you didn't have specific intervention plan. So you provide a broad recommendation. So you can say that, it seems that this factor is very key within this concept. So you won't talk as if you are so sure that this is able to reduce anything, because you have not done that kind of comparative or interventional study. So I decided to look at the differences between the two. So we'll just be looking at the two in terms of how do you see them. So with respect to purpose and objective, scoping and systematic review. The scoping review explores a broad research questions and uses piece. So why the systematic review uses the PICO framework? So we've talked about that, and it's the scoping review aims to map wide, diverse range of knowledge with respect to that topic. It want to map, it want to get a diverse opinion, published opinion with respect to different experts about that topic, so that it can point you to the direction of either your next line of research or what you should do for systematic review. Whereas for systematic review, it seeks to synthesize high-quality evidence to guide practice or policy. So it's about intervention. So that's why even in the PICO framework, intervention is there, so that you won't even make a mistake or not having intervention in your research question. That's why you have to be guided by that PICO. Once you are not guided by the PICO framework, then you are not doing a systematic review. You are just probably doing a traditional review. Then it's suitable for a margin field or field with limited research priorities. So scoping review is suitable for a margin field if, for instance, knowledge is limited or not so much article had been published in that area. So you want to just see what had been done, what are the different authors saying, and which themes is more evolving, emerging from those from your sentences. Whereas for systematic review, it talks about access and sentences of evidence from all the included studies. And then we can do either a qualitative that has to do with thematic evaluation, or we do a quantitative evaluation. So under the research questions also, we've also been told, so you can see the difference, what is known about topic X. However, what is the effectiveness of one method over the other? So you always, so anytime you are doing systematic review, always have it behind your mind that you are comparing. You are comparing. Then the inclusion and exclusion criteria. So because the other one is broad, the inclusion and exclusion criteria for scoping review will be broad, whereas the one for systematic review will be narrowed because you already have interest. You don't want to know everything about diabetics. You want to know diabetics with respect to X and Y. You want to be, so most times, even some drug manufacturers, when they come up with new findings, new drugs, they intentionally sponsored researchers to do systematic review to see the strength of, they will have, there will be publications on the new drugs to put evidence together and see the strength. Are the strength all pointing in the direction that the new drug is more effective than the whole drug or otherwise? So, but if a drug company is initiating that move, they must not interfere with the result. They can only provide resources, and that has to be well acknowledged in the publication. Because if you get support from a company and the company has interest is probably what you have studied is their product, and you refuse to acknowledge acknowledge that they probably supported that research, and later on is known, it will be something that has to do with research integrity, and it can lead to the reason why it could be the publications could be retracted. So and I think I don't know if anything had been done on research ethics. A lot of things have been. Is it part of this work? Research ethics is part of the things that Prof talked about. Yes, very good. Sorry, I couldn't join online. I said I would join online, but a lot of activities in the department. So that is very key. I'm sure is our scholar in the, Dr. Sonny at Cookread. So he will have done justice to it. So the strategy also, with respect to strategy, when you look at scoping review, is comprehensive. The strategy is comprehensive, but remember I told you that it may allow flexibility because it's exploratory. You don't know what you will see. If you use your telescope now to view, you may think you will see the insurgents like Boko Haram in the distance, and you may see Nigerian army. So you want to view before you start shooting, right? If not, you may just kill your people. So depending on what you are probably looking for, your research questions might change when you eventually have the opportunity to review, to view more in details. So that's why it's important that that allows flexibility. So it's comprehensive and it allows flexibility in you to modify your research questions. Whereas for systematic review is also comprehensive within the published work, but the predefined strategies is approved. So you cannot change it. You have to work with it and provide synthesized evidence based on what you are able to find. So the two of them consult multiple databases. The guideline for reporting is also there. Then under the data extraction, the extraction method is similar, other than we are interested in quality data under the systematic review, and quality is not the key thing under scoping review. So on data synthesis review, a descriptive thematic synthesis, but however, for systematic review, you can do a quantitative or qualitative synthesis. It helps to generate a more robust evidence for specific research question. However, for scoping review, the focus is on summarizing the extent and distribution of your topic. How much or how well has the topic been reviewed, or has there been research, priority research around the topic? That's why if you do a scoping review for a very wide area, you have to still try to narrow it. If not, it will be so complex that it will be so confusing for you to be able to make head or tail on it. So it's usually for a margin area where there is limited information on it. Then the protocol, you do a protocol development. You don't have to register the scoping review protocol, but it's important that you register systematic review protocol. Then for the output provides an overview for scoping review of the research landscape. So it gives an overview of the research landscapes to identify the gaps, and then from the gaps, you can predict the future. You can have your research priorities. And then for systematic review, the conclusion is more definite. You are able to come up with the fact that X is better than Y from evidence before you. So it's more definite about your research questions. And then this will now inform policies and guidelines. Or you hope that it will inform policies and guidelines. So what are the advantages of the scoping review? It gives insights into research landscape. We are able to have a broad perspective, a broad overview on the research topic. It helps to identify knowledge gaps. We are able to predict the future in that field. So you're able to say, oh, this is the likely area where this field will be in the next 5 years. You're able to predict the future. So you're able to understand the emerging trends. And then it's flexible, it's adaptable. You can change your approach as you move into the explorative nature of the scoping review. However, what are the advantages of the systematic review? It provides reliable, high-quality evidence because it follows a very rigorous, transparent methodology that minimizes bias. Is useful for policy and clinical guideline. It's because the methodology is very reliable and usually up to date. So the author has to provide a recommendation that can be usable for policy making and clinical guideline. It can also give a quantitative summary for meta-analysis. What are the challenges of the scoping review and systematic review? The scoping review, no critical appraiser of evidence. There is risk of overgeneralization. You have the risk of overgeneralization. It's difficult to conclude on causality. You can't say that the cause of this is this because the research question is not directed in that line. So, however, for systematic review is time consuming and is resource intensive. It requires stringent adherence to protocol. So once the protocol is predetermined and approved, registered and approved, you are to stick by it. So the risk of publication bias, because sometimes by the time you do quality assessment, you may begin to knock out some documents. So that could create bias depending on your methodology for quality quality assessment. So some publications that are key from your quality assessment, you may say they are not quality, and then you knock them out. Most times the policy makers, the policy document, the BHO document may fall in that line, and you just knock them out. So application of systematic review is highly applicable in healthcare, in education, in social sciences. So we can use it to evaluate treatment efficacy. So I don't know. I didn't bother to check with engineering, but I know you can also use it for prototype and other things that you may develop. Okay, so but healthcare, you can use it to speak to treatment, to say that, this treatment regimen is better than this other one in this condition. So you can use it like that, and then it can inform guideline. So in education, you can use it to assess intervention in education. So if, for instance, we are talking about different models, problem solving, student-centered. So if you use any of those interventions, you can compare the population with intervention, the population without intervention. Okay, in terms of output, are the students more able to do well in their JAM? Do we have more first-class students emerging from some institutions because they use student-centered learning model, and the other one uses teacher-centered learning model? So you can also use it in education, and you can use it in social sciences to look at the effect of policy changes and intervention. Okay, so we can do that. Like most times I've said, most times when you come up with a new policy, we are supposed to see the impact of the new policy on the population. But most times we don't bother to do that. But it's supposed to be a social science intervention. Like now we have cashless policy. So before the cashless policy, what were some indicators? How were those indicators faring? Are people able to have more money in their hands? Are people able to use more money for what they want to do? And now that we have cashless policy, what do we have? So that ordinarily should help us to see the strengths and the weaknesses in those policy, so that we can then know how to improve, even though we may not remove the policy, but how to improve. In scoping review, it helps us to come up with emerging fields, emerging topics. So we may want to understand new methodology, new technology, interventions, treatment. So, but it's not that we'll say that one is better over the other. But when we peruse new treatment of prostate cancer, for instance, so it's going to give you a broad perspective. Treatment, old treatment, new treatment, and emerging treatment. And then you look at it and you'll be able to say, oh, this is what is being used now, but in the next few years, we may have this being used, provided some of these things are in place. And then we can look at emerging topics. It can also help create informed policy by summarizing the current state of knowledge. So, and then it also helps to have broad, straight stakeholder engagement because it has diverse perspective. So you are not just using streamlined piece of evidence, but you are using diverse, broad pieces of evidence, and that helps you to put a lot of stakeholders, researchers in your evaluation. So it gives a broad of evidence for stakeholder engagement. So I have this to talk about the different stages. The one that the traditional I intentionally put that there because I know a lot of us are familiar with the traditional review, the scoping review, and systematic review. So under the protocol for scoping review, yes, for some, but it's never compulsory. But systematic review, yes. And then registration, yes. Then, whereas critical appraiser for quality of publication of study is not necessary in scoping review, but you see all yes for systematic review. So there are tools that are important once you want to write your review. So I know that there have been so many presentations before now. So for search, it's important that we use reliable search databases. When I was still being taught review, the person that taught me then said, avoid Google Scholar. Okay? So as much as possible, that mentality is there. As when I really want to do serious review, I avoid Google Scholar. Okay, in my line, in my field, I use a lot with PubMed because it's health based, and then Scopus, Web of Science, Medline. Okay, some of them are not free. So, but if it's Google Scholar you want to also do, fine. It's just that Google Scholar has this pool of publication that can readily cause a information overload and a lot of confusion if you are not careful. Then it's important that for you to be able to have a good review, you must have good knowledge of reference management. And I know a lot of you are already doing that. You can use Mendeley, so Zotero. EndNote is not free, so you may not bother about use of EndNotes unless you have you have access to EndNotes. And then you can use some of your tools for assessment of quality, like the confidence tool is usually done for clinical trials. If it's a study that has to do with clinical trials, then you use confidence for quality assessment. And then you have to follow the Prisma guideline for your structure and transparent reporting. So I said all of this discussion is to bring us to be able to publish in high impact journal. And I know a lot of things that have been said about high impact journal. it's important that emphasis must be on originality. So that's why for your systematic review, once you register it and it's been done before, it won't pass through that registration. You won't get approval. Okay, but for scoping review that you don't need to register it, then the onus is on the researcher to be sure that your research question is original. If somebody has already done scoping review on this, look at the recommendation of that person. And then start from that recommendation and see if anybody has even implemented that recommendation. Don't just say, oh, because SPS is requesting that you must have how many papers? 2 for MSc and 3 for PhD. And then you just rushed in anything. So if you do that, the originality will be lost. And then you may not be able to aim at publishing your review in high impact journal. So for you to also be accepted, you must follow the procedure for systematic review and the methodology for scoping review. So it's very important. Your methodology must be clear, especially for systematic review. Somebody else must be able to pick it up and replicate it and reproduce what you've done. So you have to stringently follow it. You can't afford not to. And then, so as a result, whatever you have done must be reproducible. So, and with this, is going to help to be able to achieve the high impact journal publication goal. So I decided to have some case studies, titles, case study for scoping review. So you can see these are reviewed already online. So I just went online. I tried to copy this title. So you can see example, scoping review mapping research on malaria vaccine development. Why do you think my vaccine development is coming there? Because it's an emerging field. It's an emerging field. So you see a lot also on COVID. At that time when COVID came up, a lot of people were doing that because a lot of publications came out on COVID. So there is need to quickly do evidence synthesis of those publications. Okay, so scoping review of cancer biomarkers in early detection. For people that are in cancer research, they know that is wide. Okay, but it's online. What is good mental health? A scoping review. Scoping review of malaria control strategies in sub-Saharan Africa. Okay. Scoping review on precision medicine approach in cancer treatment. So many scoping reviews are available online. Sometimes they will tell you the title, or they will now put a scoping review or scoping review. So you can see it is not it doesn't reflect. It reflects the PCC but it doesn't reflect the PICO framework or guideline. So if you look at the systematic review evaluating artemisinin-based therapies for malaria. So what is the intervention there? Artemisinin-based therapy. So they will look at other comparison. Comparison might be chloroquine. Comparison might be placebo. Placebo is when there is nothing for people that are not in medical line or biological sciences. So when you do a drug and although it's now seen as unethical, so you can do a clinical trial where you have 2 groups. Okay, so you are treating people with or you have 3 groups. So you are treating people that are diabetic. Okay, so you gave some metformin, and then there's a new drug you gave another group, and then the 3rd group, you see when you make drugs, there are something called excipients, and there are active. So you pull people doing drugs, they will pull. So if the active should be like 500 milligram like paracetamol, so they pull that. So if that you should translate to maybe 1,000 paracetamol, they put 500 times 1,000. And then because if you look at that 500 is very small. You won't even see the paracetamol tablet. So we can have a sugar-based or a starch-based excipient. So what you have there is just starch, edible starch. So they now mix the paracetamol and edible starch together, and then it goes into packaging. So what you have there is edible starch that will not do you any harm, and paracetamol. So when it's dissolved in your stomach, paracetamol gets into the blood, edible starch is being eliminated from the body. So for the control, for those control, the one they call placebo, they will not just mix the edible starch and put no paracetamol, no metformin, nothing. So you see that is not good ethically. So that's why science is frowning against it. So you may not really see research with placebo anymore. But what science is saying now is that there is a standard of care, acceptable standard of care, since you are trying to change the guideline. So what is the acceptable standard of care? So use the acceptable standard of care and then subject your intervention against the acceptable standard of care. So if it's able to beat it with outputs, then you can then propose an improvement. Okay, so let's look at different case studies. Assessment of the efficacy and safety of artemisinin-based therapies in treating uncomplicated malaria. Systematic review of chemotherapy regimen for breast cancer. Analysis clinical trial data to compare the effectiveness and side effects of different chemotherapy protocols for breast cancer patients. Systematic review on malaria diagnostic tools. Evaluate the sensitivity and specificity of rapid diagnostic tests compared to traditional microscopy. Systematic review assessing immunotherapy for advanced lung cancer. So I said at this point, it's important that you begin to also look inwards and see. I'm sure all of you have research topics here with respect to your project. Since Prof had said they want to make this translational so that the impact of this training would translate in having students that are able to publish their work in high impact journal. So what I expect from you now is to start looking at yourself, your topic. So if you have to bring up a scoping review from your work, what will it be? So if you have to develop a systematic review from your work, what will it be? So I want you to start thinking about it. For people in year one, you are I can tell you, if you have year one as an MSc 1 or PhD 1, then you are the best, because before the end of your first year, it's possible that you could generate 2 high impact journals in line with your work. And then by the time you go into the lab by second year, you are more focused, you know what had been done in your work. So, in conclusion, I want to say that the scoping reviews are a valuable addition to evidence synthesis, offering flexibility to explore knowledge gaps, map literature, clarify concepts, investigate research practices, and inform systematic review. While their purpose differ from systematic review, they must adhere to rigorous and transparent method to ensure credibility and trustworthy results, and as a result, be able to reinforce their role in high quality research. So it is important that because if you go online, so there are some school of thought that believe that scoping review is easy, is not rigorous, you can do anything, but it's not correct. It's not that it doesn't also take time. It's just that systematic review is more time consuming. But scoping review too has to be well done. It has methodology. It's not like the traditional review or narrative review. So it's so that school of thought that, oh, it's because sometimes it's been turned to the normal traditional or narrative review. So, but that is not correct. It has established research questions. It has methodology. It's just that there are just little variation between the scoping review and systematic review. And I want to say that I used these references to prepare my slides. And if you look at the lower part, I also inserted the references for registration of review. We have the Prospero registration site and then the JIB registration site. So in case you are interested, or you can also Google it online. They are widely available. So they will guide you on how to come up with how to upload your concept, your protocol online for approval in case you are interested in systematic review. And I want to say thank you for listening, and thank you for your time.
I believe we can do better than that. Okay, so what do we say? Thank you so much, Ma. We are grateful. Okay, so wow, that was impactful. That was great. Okay, so I believe we have persons with questions, like just 5 minutes. Yes, please, if you have question, can I have your hands up so you get your number now? After that, no question. So I have number 1, Mr. Shobola. Please, can you move forward? Then you were raising up your hand. Number 2, then number 3. Who is asking question again? You want to ask question? Okay, please move forward.
Good afternoon, everyone. So thank you, ma'am, for your presentation. I came in towards the end of the presentation. So while I was looking through the list of references, I saw something like scoping review, systematic literature review. So I actually don't get the reason why they had to put the two together. Is there no distinction between scoping review and systematic literature review? So why are they paired together in that particular reference in the slide she also used to explain to us? Then my second question is, we have the normal review, we have systematic literature review, and we have the scoping review. What's the unique difference? What's the distinct difference between among the three? Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Ma, for the presentation. My first question is, when you have your research question and you are using the database, you have your keywords, and during your search, when you, I'm talking about when you have, you did your search and you have like thousands of outputs, thousands of paper that matches your query. Is it that your research question is not narrowed enough? And do you have to narrow it more? I'm talking in the case of systematic literature review. And then I want to ask also the reproducibility of systematic literature review. Is it like very confirmed? Because the database can evolve. So when you do the same search later in time, the output you will get more. So I don't know if it is a problem. And also I want to ask briefly how the registration platform works. Is it a first come, first serve? Like when you register, nobody can work on the same topic like you? That's all. Thank you, Ma.
Okay, so the last
Thank you very much, Ma. I just want
a little bit of a clarification. From the Prisma definition, there's systematic and meta-analysis. So I just want clarification. Is there a difference between systematic review and meta-analysis? And then secondly, from the explanation of the scoping review, there are quite a lot of similarities between a scoping review and a mini review. So I don't know, is there any difference? Are they the same thing? I just need a little bit of clarification on it. Thank you.
Okay, ma. I think that's okay. Thank you for the presentation.
Questions have already been asked. The third one is for the systematic review. If you have a study that is not so broad, and then at the end of the day, only 22 papers or papers in their 20s come up with the match the criteria that you're looking for, would that still be a systematic review or a mini literature review? And then secondly, for the Prisma diagram, do you have to can you use the extended one for a systematic literature review, or it has to be the actual Prisma for SLR and then the extended one for the scoping?
Prof. Ma.
So thank you very much. The first person, it shows that you really came late, because we differentiated between the three, but it's still very good. The article cited, some articles compare the two, so that's why you see scoping review, systematic review. So it's because they say they are comparing the two. They are trying to compare what is the strength, what is the advantages, what are the advantages, what are the disadvantages, what are the application, how do you go about it. So that's what that paper did. That's why you have both on it. And then, just like I said before, the traditional review doesn't have methodology. So I don't know if you have done traditional review before. You have a title, and you use your search words to go into the databases, and then you, based on what you find, you begin to have subsections and build on into it. But that is not the same with systematic review and scoping review. You have a defined research question, and you have a methodology that for the for systematic review, you have to even register it. And then for that registration, the reason why you are registering it is for your own to be there. Once yours is approved, nobody can do the same thing anymore. So that answers the question of the other person. Once it's approved, that will not be given to another person. So it's actually good once you are interested and you've come up with your methodology, just don't keep it. Because if you keep it if it's an emerging field, if you keep it for 1 week, 2 weeks, you may submit and be told that no, that concept was just approved for someone. And once it's approved for someone, you can't have approval for yourself. And remember, when you are publishing, you have to put the approval. If not, you won't be able to publish. So that's why it's very key that you published, you submit on time. And for the person that asked on the databases and the different queries with visibility, yes, if you have a lot, it shows that for scoping review, if you have a lot, it shows that maybe the topic you are looking at may not be an emerging topic. So you may need to remember that you is flexible for scoping review. You can retweak it, you can improve it to make it because if you have like 2,000 now, where are you going to start from? Okay, so but remember that if you have 400, 500, you have the first level of a screening, and then you have the second level. By the time you do the first level, the second level, it will have significantly gone down. And for the person that has the question on 26 is quite okay. I've seen publication on 16, 14. As long as they are quality data, They are more than one. They are more than two. So we are saying that pool of evidence, you synthesize evidence based on pool of literature review. So once it is more than two, more than three, is sufficient. Just that is good. I've never bothered to check the minimum anyway, but I've seen 14, I've seen 16 published in high impact journal outlets, but they are quality paper. So 26 is even good as long as they are quality paper. That's why the quality is very key. People can begin to knock out the different ones that if you have 400 now, you keep knocking out until you are satisfied that you are with the best of the paper in that area, in that field, and then you can then continue now to do your analysis, if it's thematic analysis or quantitative analysis. So visibility is key. And that's why sometimes for the high impact papers that based on what Professor Sonny said, when you publish in high impact, there is higher chance of having wider audience that will read your paper. So, and because most of those high impact papers also are cited in journals, in outlets that there's no way you will not consult, like PubMed, Science Direct, Scopus, Web of Science, and most times when it is in Web of Science, most times to be on NCBI, on PubMed. So there is no way you want to do systematic review, you will not consult these databases. So that has already given the the author the opportunity of having their papers being listed. Do you understand? Being used for systematic review because it's been well published. But if you publish in places where it's just in Google Scholar and Google Scholar is not referenced, then such papers will definitely, even if it has very sound findings, it will not be part of synthesis evaluation in terms of review. Then with the Prisma, what's the difference between the Prisma with systematic review and scoping? If you remember, we said for recommendation with systematic review, this recommendation is narrowed, is not broad. Whereas for scoping review, it has a broad recommendation. So it's from that recommendation that you have the difference. So recommendation so you have to have a broad recommendation, whereas for systematic review, you have more of your recommendation speaking to the intervention. So it's narrowed recommendation. So for scoping review, you talk about the themes that are emerging themes from your analysis, from your sentences, and you talk about, it's like there is high probability that these are likely to be the next priority research going forward. So when you look at that recommendation, it differs. So that's where the Prisma really highlights their differences. So I don't know if I missed anyone. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ma. Thank you so much. I believe we're satisfied now. Are we? Okay. So do we have any other question? Okay. So Ma, Sir, we want to say thank you again. We are definitely coming back because yes, we are coming back and we'll get in touch today. From the outcome of we're going to have a mini meeting, group ourselves, so we have some people that will push to you, Ma, for the systematic review and the scoping review. Then we have people for Dr. Sonny as well, so we'll get back to you on that, Ma. So again, we want to say thank you so much. I believe I don't know if Prof is online. Professor Detiba, sir. Are you with us, sir?
Okay. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. So, like, word of appreciation to our facilitators before they go, because we're going on break now.
Okay. Yeah. Please kindly give another round of applause to our indefatigable Professor Olubanke Ogunlana. Prof, that was very rich. Of course, I would have been surprised if it was otherwise. Thanks for always bringing excellence and quality to whatever you do. This is highly appreciated. God bless you richly, ma. And one recurring thing from all the facilitators is the use of AI, Gen AI. I'm sure the students have maybe taking, maybe as seeing that as a major takeaway. You will see that there's no quality researcher that will tell you not to use AI. Because I get a lot of students expressing a kind of phobia. Will it be accepted if I use AI for research activities or not? So, but you can see the way that has been situated. Professor Ogunlana was making mention of using Gen AI to summarize publications. Of course, in fact, I'm doing that currently as we speak for a scoping review. They commissioned the scoping review work, and it's beautiful. All you need to do is know your prompting very well. You can give, if you have maybe an Excel file with headers on the information you want to extract, you just prompt your either ChatGPT or Gemini. It will do the summarization so beautifully for you. So in a situation where you have 300 publications to review, like Dr. Dirisu was saying yesterday, using Gen AI will catalyze such efforts. So, but you must do that ethically. Ethics is very, very critical. So, Prof, thank you so much. We appreciate what you have been able to bring to bear in this boot camp. And like we said, you can see that we said this is hands-on, but realistically, the real hands-on may not happen within the 2 days. So this boot camp continues through one-on-one mentorship until every single participant has a published article in high impact outlets. So the facilitators are available. You can see their passion for research. So thank you and God bless you so much. Okay, over to you, Mrs. Comfort Lawa.
Okay, thank you so much, Prof.